It was one summer night that my husband came home and found me in a fetal position on the floor, my kids around me, totally incapacitated. The world stopped that day. The world came to a crashing halt. So on that night, I had just had a total collapse, a total mental breakdown. As a pastor's wife, had been in ministry for already now about 12 to 14 years. I had 3 small children. I love the Lord. I just couldn't believe it was me collapsing mentally. And so I was seen by doctors and given the news that I had bipolar. I had rapid cycle specifier, which means my moods were up and down and all over the place. And as the diagnoses kept coming, I was more and more blown away at what they were telling me was absolutely wrong with me. I couldn't beat this thing. This thing had me and took me down. At the prime of my life, I couldn't be the mom that I wanted to be, couldn't be the pastor's wife that I wanted to be, and I certainly wasn't the person that I had hoped to be. I went on 1,600 milligrams of psychiatric drugs a day to wake me up, to put me to sleep, to help me calm down, to give me energy to make it through the day. Could not even dress myself. I couldn't make food anymore for my children. I couldn't make macaroni and cheese. I forgot how to make a cup of coffee. The simple things in life were all gone. The processes of life were gone. My head just shut down. So as I walked day and night through this, trying to pray, trying to ask God to help me, it just seemed endless, hopeless, filled with immense despair and the darkest tunnel of my life that I was in. I couldn't read the word because my mind could not comprehend words on a page. I couldn't listen to music because my mind couldn't comprehend the words being sung to me. A difficulty having conversations because of the psychotic break. I didn't know what language you were talking. I know it sounds surreal, but that's what I was fighting with. It was like a computer that had been unplugged and you're trying to access information and you could no longer access the information. And one very memorable moment was I laid on a couch and just totally, God, I can't do anything. I can't get up. I can't go to church. I can't read your word. I can't worship. I can't be a mother to my children, and I cannot lead a church in any capacity. And I heard him say, "What do you do when your kids are sick?" And I said, "Well, I take care of them. I want them, to lay down on the couch, and I want them to take their medicine, and I bring everything to them." And the Lord replied back, "Well, do you want them to go outside and play with you? Do you want to pick them up and go do your errands for the day?" And I said, "Well, of course not. They're sick. I want them to be still and quiet and to rest, and I will take care of them." And I heard the Lord say, "That's exactly what I'm going to do for you. So I want you to lay down, and I'm going to take care of you." And I remembered saying, "Well, God, I hope you can love me when I can't love you back." And when he said, "I will take care of you," it began to break the lie that I believed in my whole Christian years, 3 decades, that I needed to do something to gain the love of God back. And it was in that moment when I couldn't worship him, praise him. I had hoped that he still loved me when I was incapacitated, that he said, "Will you let me take care of you?" And I had no choice. Either he was going to take care of me or things were just completely over. And so the measure of hope I found in a very dark valley and in a very dark hole was that the God with me would speak in a way that I could grab a hold of and understand and walk a few more steps or take a few more days or weeks or months and know that he was with me in that time period. That time period was about 3 years. It was a up and down roller coaster. I was in the therapy trying to understand why I was in such a deep hole of depression, why I was in such a deep hole of mania and bipolar, and why I couldn't control emotion, and why I was sinking so deep, and having a real struggle of identifying what reality really was. And my father, my biological father, had passed away while my mother was still carrying me in the womb. And it was about 6 weeks before I was born. And he died of Crohn's disease and some complications there in his intestines. And of course, my mom was very young, in her early 20s, and just completely undone by losing a husband at 11 months of their marriage, and then having me coming very shortly after that. There was this part of my heart that was broken from not having my biological father in my life. Now, growing up, I understood and knew he died, but there was this ache in my heart for the man I never knew, a love for a man I never knew. The Lord began to just show me the healing process of bringing somebody alongside of that spirit part of me as a mentor, someone who understood healing the brokenhearted. In the mind part, the will, the soul, the emotions, I had a counselor who began to help me separate out emotions and process and talk through all the feelings that I had. And then in the body, which is your physical body, the Lord gave me a solid Christian psychiatrist who was able to help regulate all the things happening physically to me, because I wasn't sleeping, and the mood changes and all the chemical imbalances. And so I had the medication for that reason. When I got the first diagnosis, my psychiatrist said to me, you're going to take this medication. This medication is for a season. It's God's grace for a season. He said, if your liver was sick, if your heart was sick, if there was something going on in your sugar and insulin levels, wouldn't you take your medicine? And I said, well, of course I would take my medicine. And he said, then take your medicine for what's happening right now in the chemicals in your brain, because it's God's grace for a season. So that was how the Lord began to heal my whole person. And I guess fast forward into the healing part, 3 years down the road, just going through counseling and having someone talk to me about the brokenness in my heart and working with medication, I ended up at Awake America Crusade in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And it was there that God touched me. I was in a huge arena in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, probably 30,000 seats, listening to this crusade of the Awake America crusades that were going around at that time. And I felt the Lord just call me to the side, and worship began. And the first song out of the gate was, "The enemy is under our feet." And I heard the Lord say, remember where the enemy is. He's under your feet. And it was then that the Lord just began to deal with my heart and different things. And I walked away from that worship moment with a touch of God, not because someone prayed it over me, not because someone laid their hands on me, but because our God, who is a God who is with us, he's an Emmanuel God, God with us, came to be with me in that moment. And he touched me, and I walked away whole. And at that moment, I stopped taking my meds. And that's a very dangerous thing to do when you're on 1,600 milligrams of psychiatric drugs a day. You don't just walk away. But I heard him in that moment tell me that I could. And so I wanted to tell my husband, and yet the Lord said, you need to wait. And so I waited a day. And I went to him the next day, and I said, with all the faith in my heart, I think I'm healed, hon. And he goes, what makes you think you're healed? And I said, well, I told him the story. I felt the Lord touched me, what he said, what he did. And I just said, I haven't had medication for 24 hours. And he turned to me and he said, what? You haven't had any medication? Because I missed an hour and I was either on the ceiling in hyperactivity or I was out. And he, with his own faith, looked at me and pointed his finger and he said, "You're healed." And in that moment, he prayed for me. And I just felt this shift of a reality of him locking his faith with my little faith, and it was cemented. And that's over 21 years ago, because of walking through such a horrendous time in front of a congregation. I now am able to speak into people's lives and say, I get where you are. I know where you are. I can relate to those overwhelming feelings where if I had not had that, I would find it more difficult to relate to our congregation or to relate to people. And while I wouldn't have chosen the road to walk down, I'm grateful now, because depression, bipolar, mental issues are at an all-time high. And they are plaguing not only our church, but they are plaguing the world. And nobody has answers outside of take a pill, right? And I think that we need more answers. We need the fact that God is with us in the valley of the weeping. He will bring us through. There's things that we need to learn and grow and walk through that. And so out of my own experience, I birthed a ministry, Emerging Life Ministry, Emerging Life Solutions, that we call it, taking people through dealing with their stuff. And that oftentimes we're all carrying baggage in our life. We're all carrying things in our life. And we need to walk with each other, not in a condemning way, but in a very kind, gentle way, to say, I'll walk with you as you walk through this time in this season. God is the only one who can heal the brokenhearted. He's the only one who can restore what the enemy has stolen from us. He's the only one that can make sense of the senseless pieces of our life. And when we give him that opportunity, when we walk through healing with Jesus, he is the God with us who brings what seems to be broken, mutilated, destroyed, all back together again. He's the only one who can do that.